Good morning. Thank you for being on. My name is Nikita Borton. I'm a master level educational diagnostician with just under 15 years of experience, and I still love it like I did on day one. I am the founder of the Borton Institute. We are a high end professional development firm specifically for educational diagnosticians with any years of experience from 0 to 100, looking to take our skills from good to great. So, thank you for joining us this morning. This morning, we have a fireside chat with first year educational diagnosticians. What I would like to do this morning is have a chat with real live diagnosticians who just finished their first year in this role they worked so hard for. They finished all the coursework, they did all the practicum, studied, you passed the exam, interviewed, you got the job, and then boom, day one, you hit the ground running, having to figure out what to do. So I want to talk to them. I want to debrief. I want to talk about what the first year was like, so that you that are listening, who are aspiring to be an educational diagnostician or who also just finished your first year, or if you're like me, you're far removed from your first year, but wanting to stay fresh, wanting to stay aware, continuing to sharpen your skills, this conversation is for us this morning. It's just an opportunity for new diacs in particular, but in general for all diacs to kind of come together, share what our first year experiences were like in a place that is safe, to have that conversation. I hope that any first year diagnostician or walks away with tips, with strategies, with confidence to go into your second year and to rock it out. If you're an aspiring educational diagnostician, you just finished your coursework, you're going on interviews, you kind of have a position locked in, but they're waiting for your certification, all those scenarios, I want to empower you to go be confident on day one and pick up and hit the ground running. And like we said, if you're me, you're like me, you're far removed from the first year. And we want to hear what the first years are talking about. So one, we know how to help. And two, we stay fresh and we continue to sharpen our skills because we still love doing this work too. So that's what we're going to share out today. Tips and strategies on how to improve. So, before we get to our panelists today and I talk to you about the first years who I have on with me, I want to talk a little bit about how do we get better as diagnosticians? How do you grow? What are some things that you need to improve regardless of what year of experience you're in as a diagnostician? How do you get better? One key to improvement, one key to getting better is self reflection. All diagnosticians, all people really, regardless of what your role is, but specific to diacs today, all diagnosticians need to practice some type of self reflection. Self reflection is you sitting with yourself for a minute, for 2 minutes, or for 10 or minutes or an hour, however long it's for you to take to really get to the center of you. Really be in tune with what you're thinking, processing, and thinking through your day. You should be doing this daily. This is a daily practice where you're in tune with yourself, where you're aware of how others are perceiving you. How did you put yourself out into the world today? And when you take time to do that every day, that is where you become more cognizant of what your weaknesses are as a person, what your strengths are as a person, and you begin to be in tune with steps that you need to take to improve in all of your roles, whether it be your parent, sister, whatever, but in particular and specifically today, a diagnostician. You improve as a diagnostician when you take time to self reflect and grow personally. Personal growth will contribute to your growth as an educational diagnostician. So, what are some tips? How do we self reflect? What does that look like? A lot of people, one of those things that you could do is journal. A lot of people journal daily, journal weekly, journal monthly. What it does is it gets you getting all of your thoughts on paper. It's capturing it because it's when it's real and written on paper, you're better able to respond to it as opposed to it being a fleeting thought that you never revisit again. Jot it down. You can jot in your phone, you can jot down in a notebook, you can do all kinds of things to self reflect. You can make a video blog, a videos journal of yourself and keep it in your phone, and it's just for you. You're not sharing it with anyone. What you're doing is you're capturing your mind, you're capturing the state of your mind onto paper, into video, so that you can go back and you can address it. How? What steps? What areas of improvement? It is awareness for you. And when you are self aware, again, you grow personally, thus growing as an educational diagnostician. You need to be self reflective. A lot of times, too, people will take a gratitude walk. You may have heard about that. A gratitude walk, again, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 5 hours. It's up to you. The option, it is an opportunity to get alone, free your mind space, and really think and process your day and think about what you're grateful for. Problems stick out to us easily. What we don't do so easily is think about what we're grateful for. So, gratitude walks. A lot of people practice gratitude walks. I like to journal, but I also, when I am walking, I do think about things that I'm grateful for. I personally am a prayer. So when I'm walking, I choose to engage in prayer. Those are ways that I stay in tune with myself and just staying kind of hyper aware of what my mental state is. Because again, our job as a diagnostician is mentally and physically and emotionally taxing. It's draining. Ways that you address that is to self reflect and really get into a space of where am I today? How am I feeling today? And begin to address that, either written or with the walks. Another step you could take for self reflection is deciding on a focus. Another way to say that is to set goals. Set goals. What is it? What are some weaknesses you want to address? What are some areas you want to improve? Instead of just having them roll around in your mind and never really moving forward on it, set a goal. And once you set a goal, get it on a calendar, find a time, find a place, put a plan in place to begin addressing what your goals are. And another step is to share your reflections out loud. That can be scary. It can be scary. You don't have to. But what does happen is when you say things out loud to someone you trust, whether it's a mentor or a husband or a girlfriend, whatever your thing is, your girlfriend, like a friend or whatever, when you say it out loud, this is your tribe, it's your community, and they can hold you accountable. So, really important if that's something that you want to practice. Again, you don't have to share any deep or dark secrets, not saying that, but if there's a few things that you want to work on in order to grow in your role as a diagnostician, share it out loud with someone and say, hey, here's where I would like to grow. Can you help me with that this year? Just kind of keep me accountable, tap me on the shoulder when I'm getting away from the core of what I wanted to focus on. So, these are just some tips for self reflection. And again, why is self reflection important? Self reflection is the key to personal growth. And when you grow personally, you're better as an educational diagnostician. The way to improve as an educational diagnostician every day is personal growth. And one way to start and jumpstart personal growth is by self reflection practices. Okay. Part of what we talked about whenever you self reflect is being grateful. Having gratitude, writing those things down, thinking about those things, saying them out loud, and categorizing it. Part of what you hear from our panelists today is where they really captured some things they just did well. The whole first year as a diag is not a loss. There are lots of things that we learn, but there are some things that you did great and you were just good at it and you rocked it out. There were some great moments. Those deserve to be said out loud. They deserve to be celebrated, catalog it, and continue to grow on whatever your positive experiences are. So definitely do that. And then there's mistakes. And listen, I'm almost at 15 years and this year, I made the biggest mistake that I've ever made in almost 15 years. I missed a timeline. As organized and as tedious as I am and have been for years, I missed a timeline. Now, I missed it indirectly. There were a lot of factors that kind of fed into it, but really at the end of the day, my role as an educational diagnostician is to watch the timelines, and I missed it. I missed it. And I'm going to tell you how I did it so that it's something that you can avoid and not have to experience because it doesn't feel good to have to do that. But it was a huge lesson that I learned, and I'm almost at 15 years. So, how do you make the most of mistakes? How do you make the most of making a mistake? Because a lot of times, and especially if you are a perfectionist like me, and let's talk about that for a second. I am a perfectionist. And how did I learn that about myself? By self reflecting, by being hyper aware of what I was thinking, how I think about myself, what motivates me. That's key. What's motivating you, and if it's healthy or not. So, let me tell you, I'm going to describe to you about 10 characteristics of how to know you're a perfectionist. And then we're going to talk quickly about how do you make the most of a mistake. And then we're going to hear from our panelists and wrap this information into some real life practical tips and strategies that you can take into your next year to be the most successful that you can be. Okay. So here's a few characteristics how to know that you are a perfectionist. And these are some things that stuck out to me and how it brought me to realize that I have characteristics of perfectionism, and I know I do. So perfectionists tend to think in terms of all or none, black and white. You won because it was perfect or you just lost. There is no in between. Black, white. Either it was a win or it was a complete failure. Perfectionists are very high achievers. They set very high goals, often unrealistic. That to me, I still struggle with that. Very unrealistic expectations. And when the goal is not met completely, fail. It's an absolute fail. That's not necessarily healthy thinking. It's not realistic thinking, and it's not fair to yourself, especially if you're in your first year, but really in any area or any years of experience. That is not realistic thinking, all or none. So if you tend to think that way, you need to seek out some professional help, seek out some professional counseling, or just kind of look at and think through, could you be a perfectionist? And are there some things that you can do to kind of curb that? Perfectionists also tend to be highly critical of self. And when you're highly critical of yourself, if you treat yourself that way, you treat other people the same way. Period. If you are highly critical of yourself, and that is a life, that's how you talk to yourself, that's how you think about yourself, it is a natural extension of you to be thinking and being highly critical of those around you. And you're more likely to point out the mistakes of others than you are of what they've done well. So that's really something to watch for. Motivation. Let's talk about the motivation of a perfectionist. And this is really, really key to my growth as a diagnostician. Being motivated by fear. The absolute worst fear of my life is what happened just a few weeks ago. I missed an initial timeline. And again, I was motivated by the fear of missing a timeline. And I'm telling you from experience, real true to life experience just a few weeks ago, fear is not a good motivator. Fear is not a healthy motivator for keeping you on track. It leads to anxiety. Do you know how many years of anxiety that I've had about the potential of missing a timeline and what I would think about that, what that would say about my skills as a diagnostician, the fear, the anxiety, all of that goes into our highly stressful job. Now, again, I was not doing the evaluation. It was an evaluation done outside of our district. I had the art meeting planned, y'all. We were there at the art meeting, and then we realized, oh my gosh, the outside evaluator did not send us the evaluation. I was like, no worries, because I planned all of my initials early. I planned the art like 2 weeks in advance. And I told the crew, okay, no worries. We'll get in contact with the outside evaluator, which I did. And I'll reschedule the meeting for the next couple of weeks. And guess what? I forgot. I forgot to reschedule the initial art meeting. When we left from that table, bloop, out of my mind. Didn't even come back to it. And that's how I missed it. I forgot to reschedule it. It was that simple, y'all. Now, mind you, still didn't get the report. Still, even after I realized that, I had to call and tell them. I had to own my mistake. Owned it. Called them, told them I missed it. And guess what? I didn't die. I didn't. I didn't get fired. I did not. The world did not end. I'm telling you, Armageddon did not. All of this that I had built up in my mind that would occur because I was motivated by fear, because I'm a perfectionist, none of it happened. As a matter of fact, they were super understanding because I've never missed a timeline in my life. They were like, no worries, let's fix it. And guess what? We did, so it did not feel good at all, but it was such a big, huge learning lesson. And this just happened a few weeks ago, right before school ended. And what I learned is, man, I have like tortured myself for almost 15 years and the sky didn't fall. So, y'all, it's okay to make a mistake. Okay. It's okay to make a mistake. You want to be aware if you're motivated by fear because it is not healthy. It is not realistic. It's just not. And you're going to be okay. All right. You're going to be okay. So a few other characteristics of perfectionism is unrealistic expectations or focusing only on results, things like that. So those are a few characteristics of perfectionism. If they identify you at all, you definitely want to get some help, professional help, see a counselor, seek out a friend, pastor, whatever, to kind of help you address those characteristics because they're not healthy, especially in such a very demanding role like we have as being diagnosticians. Okay, a few more things, and I want to get our friends up. Let's talk about how to make a mistake. This is really, really important. And really, this is how to make the most of your mistakes. I am a huge John Maxwell fan. I am all things John Maxwell. One, because I believe in personal development and personal growth. And he is one of the people that I use in my everyday, literally everyday life, podcasts, books, reading, to grow personally. And I just love these few steps he gives people about how to make the most of your mistakes. Because when I realized that I missed that timeline, I'm telling you immediately, I was like, oh my God, I did this, I can't believe it. Da, 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 da. The world was falling. It was a whole thing. It impacted the rest of the evening. And I had to tell myself the next morning, okay, now look, it happened. We're going to take the lesson from it and not let it happen again. So I really had to push myself into that mental state again because I'm a perfectionist. And I know a lot of people have difficulty with processing the mistake, learning the lesson, and letting go of everything else. So these are a few steps that help with that. And then we'll get to our panelist. Okay. One step, the first step is you really just want to review it. Just think about it. In a way that is constructive. What happened? How did you make the mistake? Were there some things that you could have done differently? And again, you have to be realistic when you're thinking through this. What could you have done differently? And just immediately identify if there's something that you could have done differently and plan to do that in the future. That's the lesson. And really, they say if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. And that's what they're saying. If you're not making mistakes, you're not working. If you are out there busting your tail in diagnostician life, you're going to make a mistake. Period. Our job is so big. Case management, assessment, communication, principals, parents, teachers, kids, the whole thing. You're going to make mistakes. Learn or review the mistake, what led to the mistake, and what lesson can you learn from it and apply in the future. And again, you just kind of reflect on it, and talk about what's working. What about this mistake is okay? What worked about the mistake? And then again, throw away anything that doesn't inform you well, anything that causes fear, anything that makes you think less of your skill set, less of yourself because this mistake happened. You got to let that go. That is not true. It is not realistic. You got to throw it away. Okay. Number three is the recovery. And that's a big, huge deal. What I did to recover in that space, like I said, I'm a prayer, but it also helps me to talk about it. And you better know I have a plan. I have a plan for how I'm going to address initials next year, in particular for initials outside the district and how I'm going to be in contact with them in a more timely manner. That's what mistakes do. They make you better. They make you sharper. And it's okay to have that learning. You can learn from mistakes. You can learn from them, and it can be good learning. So I want you to definitely reflect on that and just rearrange any priorities. If there's anything you need to get clear about, if the mistake helped you to be more aware of what your priorities are, plan according to your priorities, and just make sure that you're addressing what's important and put your less important things at the bottom of your checklist, so to speak. Mistakes can help you to really get clear about, okay, what should I be prioritizing and focusing on the most. So it just helps you to rearrange how you're thinking about things, and then it can help you to recharge. It can fire you up again. Really, if you're like me, you're like, okay, fine, I'll take the loss. I took the hit, but I'm going to use it in a way that's constructive. I already have a plan for how I'm going to improve next year. It can kind of invigorate you and keep you fresh and keep you going. So those are just a few ways on how to process a mistake. There's a little bit more resources from John Maxwell. There's also a podcast. I'm happy to share that podcast with you. It's really, really, really good information if you know that you do not process mistakes well. All right. So here's my email, bortoninstitute@gmail.com. You can send me an email and I'm happy to send and share out any of these resources that we talked about today. Okay. So enough about me. Now let's hear from our panelists. I'm going to pop our panelists on and let's talk a little bit to these first year diagnosticians. Hi, friends. Thank y'all so much for being on. Sandra, I think you're muted. You can unmute. It's no worries.
Oh,
What
yes.
I want to do is I want you guys to introduce yourself. You can tell us what region of Texas that you're from, but you don't have to get too specific. And if you had to come up with one word to describe your first year, what would that one word be? All right. So, Sandra, we're going to start with you, and then Haley, we'll go to you. Introduce yourself and tell us that one word.
Okay, hi, my name is Sandra Garza, and I just completed my first year as a diagnostician. I am from South Texas, um, right by the border. Mexico is like 10 minutes away.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would use the word, there's a lot of words, exciting words. I would say learning. I learned so much about myself and my job description that I didn't know. So, learn
I
is a
love
good
it.
word.
I love it. Wonderful. Thank you. And Miss Haley.
Hi, I'm Haley Carroll. This, as well as my first year as a diagnostician, and I'm actually in North Central Texas. And I mean, while there was a lot of learning, honestly, I kind of feel like my first year was frustrating.
Sure, I love that. And so many people are going to have that same sentiment because it's hard. Our job is hard. I will ask, when you guys were in your preparation programs and you were thinking about being a diagnostician, was it what you thought it would be? Is it what you envisioned the role being? Sandra? Sandra's saying no. What are you thinking, Haley? Was it what you thought it would be?
I mean, partly, but there was just so much more to it than the preparation program prepared us for, I feel like.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. Now, were either of you special education teachers before becoming a diagnostician?
Yes.
Okay, so Haley, you came right out of general education world. I
Yeah,
did that
15
too.
years in gen ed, straight
Yeah.
to diag.
Okay, wonderful. I did that same thing. But Sandra, you had a little peek of
Yes.
diagnostician life before you jumped in there.
Yes,
Good.
I did 10 years as self-contained.
Wonderful. So good. I'm glad that you had that background. And I will say, Haley, for all the people who are general education for us, like us, you can do it. It's a steep learning curve. And like I said, I didn't know what an art was when I started. I didn't know that there were arts. And now I had inclusion kids in my classroom, but I didn't go to their arts. And if I did go to an art, I was so unsure about what it even was. I didn't even know that I was at an art. That's how green I was when I came into this role as a diagnostician. So if you are a gen ed person in the world and you are wondering, can I do this? Haley and I are here to tell you, yes, you can. You can. I don't even want to say it's harder than what Sandra or other special education people go through because it's a steep learning curve for anybody,
Yeah.
I would think. But yeah, if you're Gen Ed World and you're watching this, yes, you can absolutely do it. You can rock it out too. All right, ladies. So we talked about self reflection practices and we talked about being grateful and really celebrating what your successes were your first year as an educational diagnostician. So, Haley, we'll start with you. What was a good lesson that you learned this school year, a positive lesson that you walked away with, and something that you're good at that you learned about yourself?
Well, I mean, I learned how valuable templates and having a list of blurbs is. Having a list of those go-to phone numbers that you call every week, like instead of having to go into Outlook and look them up every time,
Sure.
just having a little sticky there with those top 10 people kind of thing, and also overscheduling. Give yourself an extra 15 minutes at the end of a meeting because somebody's going to want to talk a little extra. Or give yourself an extra 30 minutes at the end of an evaluation with a kid because you're going to want to sit there and go through and finish up your notes and make sure everything's put in. So that organization component, for me, I had spreadsheets galore that I could share with people so they could say, hey, how many kids are you working on right now? I had that readily available. And then I also had a notebook where I kept track of all my kids. I had tabs on the right for ARDS only and tabs on the top for if they were being evaluated. So just having those organization systems really kept me on track and helped me maintain my sanity.
Yes, I love it because you can't keep it all in your brain. Your brain can't keep it all. I mean, from minute to minute, if I don't write something down, it's gone. And I always say that words are like birds and bugs, they fly away. I cannot hold on to it. So if I have a conversation after an ARD, I always follow up with email me because I will not remember that we talked about this. I don't remember this kid because I'm going to a completely next kid in the next hour and I won't even, this won't be anywhere in my brain. So that's really good, Haley. So what you learned is that organizational tools are a must have. Did you find yourself making your own organizational tools or were you stealing from people or just kind of combination?
I pretty much made up my own stuff.
Okay.
I had during my prep program started working on, hey, these are the things I feel like are important to have to be able to have ready access to, like, who's the kid's teacher, when were they referred, is this an initial, is this a reeval, is this a special request?
Right.
Having all those details available in a spreadsheet, and then as the kids are finished with a spreadsheet, it's super nice because you can just drag that whole row
Yeah.
down and say, this one needs to now ARD, or this one I'm totally done with.
I love
So just having that available. And then also the notebooks that I keep, instead of having to dig into our district software
it.
to
Mhm.
find all that information, I just keep that notebook, and the tabs just have student initials on them.
Sure.
So just flip to whichever kid, and I've got their name, their teacher's name, their disability, their parent contact info, and then a record of all the contact that I've had with their parents.
I love that. So I know, and I know that, well, you can tell me what your experience is when you're creating your organizational tools. It is a lot of work up front, very tedious, but man, you
So
use
worth it.
it oh my gosh, you use it every single day until the end. And probably in your second year, you're going to find yourself perfecting it.
Oh, I was constantly making changes to it, updating, adding columns, moving things around.
Mhm.
And at the end of the school year, I went through and just dragged that tab over because I don't want to get rid of it,
Yeah.
but then copied and made some modifications for this upcoming year that I had been thinking about doing, but just didn't have the time to do during the year.
Yeah, I love that. So good. So I'm hearing you say that you learn organizational tools are absolute must have. You need it. You kept yours electronically, but you also had a notebook for paper and pencil.
Yes, and I tried having, my paper calendar and my digital calendar, where I've got all the different arts and
Sure.
everything put in there, but
Sure.
I ended up, I guess, about halfway through the first semester ditching the paper calendar because there were so many changes. It's
Yes.
constantly changing, and
Hmm.
I just felt like the digital was so much better for me.
Uh,
But at the same time, on my wall, I've got little dry erase calendar boards that
right.
I've got, the due dates for the kids. And as my initials have days they missed, I can then just erase them and move them however many days I need to.
That's so good. And what I often find with people is that a lot of our life, either most people or either mainly paper and pencil and they sprinkle in a little bit of digital life because they have to, or the opposite, they're hardcore digital everything and only write with pen and paper if they absolutely have to. And then there's a lot of us who are right in the middle. And I find that the reason that my calendar is digital is because people are attached to it. I have to send appointments.
Yeah.
But what I find is on my paper calendar or dry erase, which serves the same purpose, are my personal tasks like testing, calling a parent. That's not always on my digital calendar. So that's so good. So the tip there for people watching, especially if you're going into the field, is to be aware that you have to know, are you digital life? Do you like paper and pencil tasks? Are you going to do a little bit of both? Because you have to have an organizational system. It's like being a first year teacher. You have to have behavior management. You can't move forward without it. It's the same thing with being a diag. If you don't have an organizational system, you cannot be successful in the role. Period. That is not an overstatement by any means. We juggle everything. Your system is not going to be perfect because you got to learn how you work as a diag, so your system is going to constantly change. I'm updating mine for next year. So it may not look the same year to year to year, but you have to have some foundational system. That is so great, Haley. Thank you for sharing that learning with us. All right, Sandra, good lessons that you learned, some moments of gratitude for you. What was your good takeaways this year?
My good takeaways were I communicated very well with my teachers. Communication is so it's key, parents, administrators, everything, but especially with the staff that you work with. I was very fortunate enough to become the diagnostician at the campus where I've been working for 15 years. So
Wonderful.
I had a bond with the teachers already. And when I left the self contained unit, I just went into the diag position. And I guess I was very blessed with having past diagnosticians that were hid their stress very well. So when I went into it, I was like, why am I
How are
so
they
stressed, frustrated? And it
Uh-huh.
was like I was calling them all like, I never saw you like this. Did you ever feel this way? But because that I guess it's part of our job too.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
I'm panicking, I don't want the teachers to panic.
Yes,
But
really good.
sending out like Haley said, being so organized. And I thought I was very organized as a self-contained teacher.
Mhm,
I found that I was not, not for the diag world.
mhm.
I diagnosed myself with ADHD, but now that I'm looking at your list of perfectionism, and I
Yeah.
think that I have that
Mhm.
too.
Yeah.
I'm very critical of myself, but I would send out like a weekly, every Monday, ladies, these are the arts coming up this month, or maybe I would just forward the same email I forwarded last week,
Sure.
because if they miss a deadline, I miss a deadline.
Right.
So
Very
did
good.
that. And I think my biggest mistake this year, as my first year diagnostician, I didn't ask enough questions, to my mentor, to my fellow diet coworkers. And I didn't ask questions out of fear, because I
Mhm,
didn't want them to think, oh,
mhm,
she's
mhm.
struggling, or she
Yeah.
can't do the job,
Right.
or for it to get to my director and for her to be like, what's going on? Why are you asking so many questions? But
Right.
I found out it's part of the job.
Mhm,
You have to ask questions.
mhm,
You
mhm.
need that your coworkers to help you out every now and then. Especially like never written an FIE, so
Mhm.
when I told my mentor like, can you check it? I'm going to present it. She said, "What in the world, Sandra?" She's
Yeah.
like, "Where did you get this template from?" And I'm like,
Love it.
It's on the tab, the
Yeah.
FIE, how to create the FIE." But
Yeah.
I just didn't ask, and I assumed my
Sure.
biggest mistake,
Mhm,
assuming.
mhm, mhm.
So I created a growth plan for myself,
Good.
and always keeping in touch with the related services, making
Yeah.
sure they're, or I'll send them an email, calendar invite. Hey, ladies, next week I'm going to schedule so and so's initial art. Just a heads up. Giving heads up emails was a big thing also.
Yes.
So yeah, that was my biggest take this year was it's okay to ask questions.
So good. I love that. So I'm going to summarize what you're saying. You're saying that communication in relationships really anchored your first year.
Yes.
That is, and it's probably because communication in relationships are a natural extension of who you are. It's probably something that you do in other areas in your life. Same thing for Haley. Her big thing was organization, and it's probably a natural extension of her linear personality. She's probably bullet pointed already. It's how she lives in other areas in her life. The takeaway for this, for new diagnosticians who are new-ish, year one, two, three, four, somewhere in there, is that what you do best is a natural extension of your personality. Relationships are everything. You cannot move forward. I would venture to say that relationships are as key as organizational tools.
Yeah.
We are highly relational by trade as an educational diagnostician. If you are a hermit crab, you have some work to do. You have people swarming around you. Every bit of the day. If you are an introvert, the way to prepare for a diag role is working in time for yourself to be alone at some part of the day so you can recharge. If you're an extrovert, probably like Sandra, probably like myself, you draw energy from being around people, hubbubbing, email, phone calls, communicating, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, you can go walk, run, do your thing because you've been charged. If you're an introvert, by the end of a busy art day, you're crawling to your car, covering your head with pillows. Haley, is this you? Are you an introvert?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you have to go home and recharge. It is so important if you are an introvert to you have got to self-reflect and find ways to recharge in private. You have to recharge. You can't go day to day without taking time to recharge fully, getting alone, getting into a private space, sitting with your thoughts, reading, glass of wine, whatever your thing is, just kind of bring yourself back together because introverts recharge in private, right? We're extroverts like me and Sandra. We've been charged all day. We have to find ourselves winding down. We have to make ourselves wind down at the end of the day. So it's just opposite ends. So being aware of your personality trait is very, very important to diag life. So good, Sandra. Really good. So communication and relationships are what really anchored you in what you did well this first year. You were very intentional about building relationships from the jump. And I always recommend that, especially for New Year, first year diags, especially if you're going to a campus where you don't know anybody. And even if you do, you have to be intentional about making connections. That I'm telling you, that is as critical as having organizational skills. Really good, ladies. Thank you for bringing it up. And then the last few minutes together, I wanted to talk about lessons that we learned the hard way. My hard lesson that I learned this year is you're not going to die if you miss an initial timeline. I've always, for years, celebrated and just about prided myself on the fact that I had never in my life, ever could not even envision myself missing a timeline. And the Lord was like, bloop, there you go. Now you can envision it. Now it's yours. And I'm telling you, I did not die. I did not die. My diag life did not come crumbling down. It just was not everything I built it up to be. Now I'm not doing it again. Hopefully, I'm not doing it again. I'm not advocating for it at all. It does not feel good. There were like recourses that you have to take to fix that, you know. But I did not die. All right. So that was my hard lesson I had to swallow this year. So Sandra, this time we'll start with you. What were your hard lessons? Oh, and you kind of got into your hard lesson. Tell us again about asking questions and what your hard lesson was.
Yes, my hardest lesson was, of course, asking the questions. Not thinking that because I asked that I was failing at my job, but I
Mhm.
needed to rethink that and say, I'm going to ask because I want to be better at my job.
So good.
And also, with that was also not waiting to evaluate the student, because I would say, well, I'm going to finish this and then I'll go pick up a student to evaluate them. But
Mhm.
something will come up. It always did. And every time that I waited a little bit or an extra day or a half a day, I always regretted it. And
Mhm.
there I was at the end, like, maybe working on the report at midnight. I did a lot of communication, building those relationships throughout the day, that I took the time that I could have been working on a report, to do those things. And when I could have been evaluating, and maybe it would have been a quick email as opposed to going
So
directly to the teacher, maybe asking her through email, would have saved me time.
I love
But
it.
scheduling everything, whether it be going, picking up the student and maybe doing 3 or 4 subtests, and I'm going to pick them up for 30 minutes or right before lunch or right after lunch, and just getting it done, like, procrastinating, I guess. Don't procrastinate.
That I love that. That is so Good. So there's really two hard lessons that you drew out. One is self perception. You really had to grapple with it is okay for me to ask questions. It doesn't mean that I am weak, a failure. It doesn't mean that I'm not good enough, which is an absolute fear of a lot of people in this role. It doesn't mean you're not good enough if you have a question. It means you want to be better. It means that you want to do the best work possible. So you're going to curate your resources. You're going to ask mentor, ask people with more experience so you can do the job well. It saves you time
Yeah.
on the front end to ask questions and not be overly concerned with how people may perceive you. First year diagnosticians, and really frankly, second and third year diagnosticians, people know you're new, especially the first year. I am nervous when a first year diag does not ask questions, doesn't ask any questions, and you're out here going rogue. There's no way you can know everything about diag world and not have one question when you're new. It's not possible. If you are a first year, if you're going into the first year, you have got to ask questions. It is okay. And like Sandra said, you're going to save time on the front end if you ask questions up front, get the answers, and then do the work, right? Because you waste time figuring out, looking, stretching for your own, and then still having to go back to ask the question anyway. So good, Sandra. That is so good. Thank you for sharing that. And then time management. I have always taught you have got to put your appointments and the task on the calendar because you're going to see all this space on your calendar. You get to the end of the day, you're like, what did I do all day? Where did the day go? But you didn't put like the phone call on the calendar, the time it takes to score the protocol. You didn't put that on the calendar. The time it takes to let the front office know they go get the kid finds you, you walk to one storage closet. Oh, you're testing it here. Okay, let's find another space. That's been 20 minutes. This is junk that has got to go on your calendar. Time management is what you're talking about there, Sandra. When you find yourself working on a report in the FIE at midnight, things like that. And sometimes that's going to happen the first year because we never wrote an FIE and it's endless. Endless. And that's what Haley was saying about having shells, the how life-saving shells are, right? And templates to cut down and help with time management. So really, really good. Y'all, I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Sandra. Really good. What about you, Miss Haley, the hard lesson this year?
Um, my hard lesson was actually on an initial evaluation, and it involved extra evaluators because it was a student who's bilingual.
Sure.
And since the student's dominant language was Spanish, most of the evaluation fell to the bilingual evaluator.
Sure.
And, you know, we've got 45 school days.
Sure.
They went in a hurry. And when we got to the last week and I was checking in, found out that the bilingual evaluator had not completed their portion.
Sure.
So we ended up actually, that evaluator had to come and do additional evaluation the day the evaluation was due. I was so grateful that that student was actually present that day.
Exactly.
I mean, she ended up having to pull in for 2.5 hours. The poor kid missed his specials, you know, missed recess, but she got the evaluation done, wrote it up that night. We got it archived. You know, it all ended up getting done. But because of that, I added another step to my process,
Sure.
which is starting at 4 weeks out, I start sending an email to each evaluator involved about these are the kids I have that I still need data from you on, or I still need this part of the report. You know, please
Sure.
put this in the read or put this in the FIE.
Sure.
Wherever it happened to go, I got very specific because I had another evaluator who would frequently go in and just put it in the FIE, even though it was a read, like a reevaluation. So it needed to go in the read section, not the FIE.
Sure.
So I learned from that.
Right.
And I'm going to continue with that. I do the same thing with arts, making sure that my resource teachers and inclusion teachers are getting those new goals put in and communicating with parents to share those new goals to make sure that it's all out there within our district's timelines.
I love that. So good. Your hard lesson was the importance of communication. The
Yeah.
importance of communication. I really, really love that. And again, I'm telling you, when it comes to time, time is a precious commodity for an educational diagnostician. Literally, every day counts. Every single day. And it sounds like, Haley, you correct me if I'm wrong, the hard lesson that you learned is that communication, effective communication, is a time saver.
Absolutely. And
Effective
just
communication,
not knowing as a first year diag how
absolutely.
much I needed to communicate
Yes.
was, what I feel like I learned.
I
So
love it.
better to over communicate than just assume that everybody's going to be on top of their list or that they have a list to even refer to.
That is so good. I love that. Tell me again a few things that you changed different. I'm sorry, a few things that you're doing different with how you communicate are what?
I am making sure that I share the list of all my students who I have evaluations going on,
Hmm.
that others can view and comment on. And
Hmm.
then also keeping up with that 1 month set of communication and maintaining that every week as we get closer to either the evaluation due date or to the art date.
Love it. And communicating with them in a more timely manner to keep everybody on track because that's what we do as diagnosticians. We keep everybody on track. And then Sandra, one thing from what you learned in regards to the questions or time management, what is something that you're doing different from next year as a result of the hard lesson you learned?
As soon as I get an initial referral, I usually take, the parent input, and I have on a Word document. I type out all the, the sociological, all that chunk that we have to write on the FIE. So
Yeah,
that saves me time because I just go to the parent information, kind of like notes,
so
and
good.
so it's easier to create my that part of the FIE, and the health where the nurse screens them, all that stuff, and then I go right away. Have they been retained? Have they not? So I get just like, the that background part of the student, put it on a Word document. And so then when I'm sitting actually doing the FIE, I can just, cut and paste from that. So that saves me that time of getting to know the student on paper before the FIE.
I love that.
Yeah. And
Good.
also, like what Haley was saying, like I do the bilingual evaluations also.
Mm.
So if any other of my fellow diagnosticians have reached out to me to help in that department, I kind of like make it a priority to get it done fast because I don't want that to happen again. I don't want them to say she didn't, she tested and she didn't hurry up and meet the deadline, or they're
Exactly.
having to chase me. I don't.
Yeah.
That's my
Don't want to be
fear. I don't
changed.
want them to chase me. Yeah,
I love
so
it.
those
Yeah.
are priorities. Yes,
I love
definitely.
it. Oh, so good, y'all. So good. I love talking about this. I could talk about it all day because I
Yeah.
love this work as diagnostician. But kudos to y'all. You made it through your first year. You're steering the second year down, and you're already better than what you started. So what I'm so excited for y'all. So excited for what you encounter in the second year. And thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. We are forever indebted, forever grateful. So thank you all so much. And like I said, I'm going to email you guys a few things as soon as we're done here. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. All right, guys. That's a little bit from our experts who were first year diagnosticians this year. I know that you got a lot of great tips and feedback and information. So for those of you who are watching, if you want more information about how to prepare for your first year as an educational diagnostician. This is my website that you can go to. I'm going to share my website with you. It's ticking at the bottom of your screen. It's www.theboardeninstitute.com. When you first go there, this is the home page. If you click on products and services, you will see everything that we offer at the Borden Institute. Again, we are a high-end professional development firm. We are looking to train educational diagnosticians well. That's what we do at the Borden Institute. So, of course, we have group coaching for educational diagnostician. This is a new service, just rolled it out. And here's some online digital courses, and I want to draw your attention here. First day Diag digital course. I have a digital course for a brand new first year educational diagnosticians. We're talking about all things, strategies, tips, more practical advice on how to be ready on day one. We talk about effective implementation, effective communication. I do a lot on time management and organization, and then also bonus content on how to avoid burnout. The regular price for this course was $250. Like I said before, and I'll say it again, I've had easily hundreds of people take this course. It is excellent information. It is well worth $250, but I dropped it for a short period of time. It's going to be $175 for the next few days. All right. This is a pre-enrollment. The course will be available to purchase. The course will be available to download June 24th, 2023. It's going to be a digital course. You download it, you watch it, you get a private link to it, you go back, you watch it over and over and over again to get all the information that you need as a first year diagnostician for the next few days. I dropped the price from $250 to $175. I took about $75 off. So that's accessible to everyone because it's not about breaking the bank. It's about getting you the information that you need. All right. So that is there for you. Again, the website is www.theboardeninstitute.com. First year diag digital course. It is everything that you need to know your first year as an educational diagnostician. If you have questions about anything that we discussed today, if you want resources like how to know you're a perfectionist, how to make a mistake, how to get the most of making a mistake, how to do self-reflective practices, things that you can do to self-reflect and how to grow personally, email me boardinstitute@gmail.com. I'll be happy to share these resources with you and shoot them to you in the email. So thank you again for all of you that were on. I appreciate it. Sandra and Haley, again, thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us this morning. And if you have any questions, you all can email me at theboardeninstitute.com. I hope you found the information valuable. Thank you all. Thank you, Sandra and Haley.